welcome. This is Beth Jordan, and this is my 24th podcast on At Beth Jordan Chat with Me 23. And I'm super excited. I can't believe we've done 24 podcasts, all about talking about indie authors. And why we're here is to promote indie authors, to give them a voice, to give them an opportunity to have lots more people know about them than through the usual social media channels. So my guest today is children's author, but she's not just any children's author. She is an award-winning children's author of at least 2 books. So welcome, Kaye Patten. Hello, Kaye. No.
Hi there, Beth. It's good to see you.
Hi, Kaye. Thank you for joining me on this channel. And I think
Pleasure.
I think the books you have already written, which I have read, except for Princess Nanny, I have read A Donkey Named Dave, Say Cheese, and Marcus and the Milk Snatchers. I think that's the title of your book. Yeah.
That's right, yes.
I love the stories. I actually did take time to read. I always try to read every author's book that I'm interviewing, and I love them. I love the illustrations. So just one observation I made in your children's stories, each story is very different from each other. So tell us a little bit about the background to each of the stories that you have written.
Well, if I take the amazingly titled Marcus and the Milk Snatcher, um, I picked Marcus as a name simply because of the alliteration with milk. But there is, they're going to remain nameless, but there is a member of my family who is known as the milk snatcher because they're always drinking all the milk and love the milk, and they're not even a child. So, um, they've even been known to drink all the milk and leave none for tea, which leaves people a little bit cross. So they've been known as the milk snatcher. They will go on to be known as the milk snatcher. They are the original milk snatcher. I just thought it would make a good, fun children's whodunit.
Yeah. And I think I'm not going to give the story away, but it is a very nice ending as to who exactly the milk snatcher is in your story. And I think, and the illustrations I particularly loved the illustrations. Do you want to tell me a little bit about the illustrations, how they came to be that
You.
style?
Thank you very much. I I did not do the illustrations. I had the illustrations done by somebody that I found on Fiverr on the platform there, where there are lots of artistic people. But all the illustrations were my idea that
Mhm.
I had to describe. And it was amazing, really. One of the big learning points for me as an author was learning that illustrators don't read the book and that you have to really describe exactly what you want, because if they read every book, they wouldn't have time to do any work. So that was a huge learning curve for
Mm,
me. But fortunately, people have been very complimentary about the illustrations. Um, and I also I wanted to include the time, as in the passing of time, because sometimes for young children, the passing of days and weeks can seem like an awful, awful long time. And also, I wanted them to add to their learning of days of the week. So, this whodunit, this mystery that does have a few clues throughout the pages, um,
yeah.
was done. It was my idea, but I didn't do the illustrations. But
Mhm.
the only thing I did do was that I changed the cover because I wasn't too keen on the original cover. And so I changed it and I tried to make it a little bit like do it in a a ladybird book
Yes.
style that was very much one of my favorites in the 70s. I tried to do it in the Ladybird book style to create that image
Yeah. It's lovely.
for Marcus. So yeah, no, I had an illustrator, and in fact, she did the illustrations for A Donkey Named Dave too.
Oh, okay, so that's really interesting because A Donkey Named Dave, it's more black and white sketch, so it has a completely different feeling. I wouldn't have related the two books to the same illustrator.
Well, it's interesting. As again, another thing for me as a learning curve was that when you do have an illustrator, they ask you what style do you want the illustrations done in. So I did some research, and I said I'd like them to be done similar to this style or that style. And but again, A Donkey Named Dave was for slightly older children.
Hmm.
So they were more line drawings at the top of chapters, but the illustrator again then redid or tried to put on paper what I had described. Something interesting in that is our cultural understanding of what we mean when we say things, because I was trying to describe to an illustrator who lived in India
Hmm.
about a spoon cafe that may be a transport cafe.
Yeah.
And the closest I could get her understanding to um, that was acceptable was this.
Yes.
And it wasn't exactly what I wanted, but it was the closest we were going to get to a transport cafe
Yeah.
that we know
Yeah.
in this country. Um, but it's finding negotiating and meeting in the middle. And
Yeah.
but that was a huge learning curve for me,
Mm.
is our cultural understanding of a description.
I think you've hit upon a very important point, maybe even for the listeners, that we have to be really, really conscious that when we're asking people from abroad or from a different culture to do something for us, that we are very clear. Because I know that in India, they don't have transport cafes, but they have things called dhabas. So dhabas are like roadside cafes. And I've been to India often, so and I've sat in the dhabas outside on a bed, drinking a cup of hot tea, and it is a totally different feeling to what a transport cafe is like in the United Kingdom. So yeah, that's a very important learning for listeners to take away with them, hopefully. So there's another story that I really loved very much, and I loved it because of this. Well, actually, I say it's simple, but it probably was quite complex. And that was your other book called Say Cheese. Whole different feeling of the way it was presented, the font size, the way you did the images. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Say Cheese was done for much younger children, pretty very much under fives, and that story, the illustrations are quite personal, and the story is personal, certainly to my family. Say Cheese was written for my brother's grandson, and unfortunately, my brother took his own life in January 2020, and his daughter had her first child in 2022.
Mm,
And his name was Jasper. And I realized that there were so many things missed on both sides,
mm,
that I decided to write a book for Jasper to give him a memory of maybe a day out with the granddad he'd never meet.
yeah.
And so I created Say Cheese for him. And it is a story about going to the zoo with your grandpa. And it's got a very predictable, repetitive narrative, which is what children under five and certainly under threes really enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and whereas older children enjoy a bit more detail,
Mm,
and certainly with 3-year-olds, we're getting them to enjoy books and enjoy the anticipation and the fun. Of when you turn over that page and you have that big surprise that there's an animal there ready to say cheese, which is always lovely.
I love that
Um,
giraffe. Oh, sorry, zebra. I
but at
love
the
that zebra.
beginning, yes,
But there is a
when
giraffe, I
when we
know.
there is a giraffe, but when we write for older children, they expect us to set the scene a little bit. They want to know the details, whereas
Yeah. He's
uh,
lovely. He's gorgeous.
younger children, you need to go straight in. And I was watching an interview with Julia Donaldson,
Mhm.
and she was talking about writing stories for young children, and she said you need to go straight into the action with those children, with that age group. You need to go straight in.
Mhm.
And I thought, what better way to go straight in for the story with the opening line for Say Cheese is at the zoo with Grandpa.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it. There's nothing else you need to know. Just this boy is at the zoo with Grandpa,
Yeah.
and then we go from there.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of advice I picked up from the master of children's stories
Yeah.
is with younger children, you need to go straight in.
Yeah. And so your
If I
back.
might say, with older children, they do want a bit more detail. And as I know from the weekend that has just gone, um, excuse me, my granddaughter got a new book in a series of books that she's reading, and looked at the cover. She was a bit perplexed. Because there was something on the cover that didn't fit with the previous book in the series.
Mhm.
Um, and she's now ordered book 5. She's just finishing book 4. Something on the cover of book 5 is not right. And she picked it up and she said, "That's not that. She's not this. He's not the lion." And I said, "Well," she said, "That's not right." I said, "But maybe it will be revealed when you read this one." And
Yeah.
she was very concerned that it wasn't depicted how she'd
Hmm.
thought on the front cover. So, if anything, I've learned when writing for older children, you need to have a really good memory and don't forget anything because they won't.
Yes, it's truly amazing. Just a little interruption over here is that when I read to my grandsons at night, I'm reading to them and I'm thinking they're not paying any attention. So I'll stop and I'll say, "What was the last word I said?" And they both say that, "Oh, you are paying attention." They listen to everything. You're absolutely right, Kay. We shouldn't underestimate children at all when it comes to stories. They really pick up on everything, don't they? So, your background, though, what is your background that you're writing children's stories?
Well, my background is I'm the youngest of 4 children from a working class family in East London, and we lived in a council house in Stratford. My dad was a lorry driver, and my mum was a machinist who,
Mhm.
at the age of 40, decided to go to college and did her NNEB as a nursery nurse, and was from then on was thoroughly absorbed in this new career that she'd found herself. And I learned a lot from listening to her. I went on to be a mature student at the University of East London, where I have a BA honours degree in history
Uh-huh.
and politics. And then I'm quite spontaneous, Beth, because you'll never believe what happened. I was a driving instructor
Mhm.
and I went to work one day and dropped the children off on the way. And I took my son into nursery and I looked around on the wall and there was no painting on that wall that anyone under the age of 25 had had anything to do with.
Mm.
And I looked around and naively, I accept naively, I looked around and thought I could do a better job than that now.
Yeah. Okay.
And I put my money where my mouth is. And I went and got back in my car, which was a driving school car, because I didn't have a car of my own at the
Yeah.
time. And I drove to a college in Ardley Green in Hornchurch, and I signed myself up for an access course, which was for mature students going back into education that morning. And I handed the car back that night. And the following day, I started at college. I was a few days behind everyone else.
Mhm.
And I went on to get a place at university straight to do a degree. And then my teacher training the year after that. And, when I left for work that morning, I had no idea I was going to stop working and train to be a teacher.
Oh, extraordinary story.
I'm a little, I'm a little bit unpredictable.
Actually, I'm very glad you are because you have
Well, I like
produced
to
a
say
beautiful book.
spontaneous.
Well, let's say hooray to spontaneity and hooray to you that you just decided to change your career. That's pretty big. I don't know if I'd have quite the courage to do that, actually. Just change my career. I think I should take a page out of your
I'm not
book.
sure if it was I'm not sure if it was courage or naivety or stupidity really, but it happened exactly like that.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about you winning awards for your books. How did that come about?
Wow. Well, when I was, you and I both know Michael Heppel and the um, Write That Book um, course. And during that course, there was other people on there, award-winning people like um, uh, I've forgotten his name now. Richard, is it Crane?
Oh,
Some
Roger Wilson Quinn. Yes.
Roger Wilson Crane.
Yes.
Yes, sorry, Roger. And other people have said, and about putting your book in for competitions and be seen, be put yourself around and be noticed. And so I took that advice, and I. It was funny because I've only ever entered a donkey named Dave into two competitions and awards, and it got the Wizard Award last year, and this year I was fortunate enough to be a finalist in two categories for A Donkey Named Dave in America in the Hindi Book Awards,
Wow.
and it got first place for best cover, which I was thrilled about because although I didn't draw it, I designed it
Yes.
and said what I wanted. So become second in best story and first in best cover. So I was absolutely delighted
Yeah,
with that.
congratulations. Because when you think of the amount of people that actually enter an award, in America, it could be anything up to 20,000 people, as an example. So if you came first,
Mm.
congratulations, well done.
I was delighted. And it was funny because I got an email saying something about you're a finalist, and but it went into my junk mail. And once people, when you start look, you know what the internet's like.
Mm,
Once you start making inquiries on things, you get all sorts of an influx of emails that I dismissed it. And then I got another email regarding that the winners were going to be announced tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And it kind of rung a bell with a previous email. And so my partner and I, we looked on the Hindi library and went back to November.
yeah.
And there was a donkey named Dave named as a finalist in two categories on their website. And I had no idea.
Wow. Wow.
So
So,
that was a wonderful surprise.
and has anything else come out from winning awards? Have you done any podcasts or given any talks? Have you been into school to talk about your books or storytelling?
Um, I haven't. Beth, you're my first podcast.
Oh,
You're my very first podcast, so thank you very much. I've had a couple of invites, and I've had some invites into schools. One where somewhere they want to build up a relationship where we're writing and communicating throughout the year.
mm,
And I took some advice about, I think marketing is something when you're trying to become an author and you've got a full-time job and you're trying to write and you're trying to learn the business of being an author,
mm,
particularly in the self-publishing
yes.
field, there's so much to learn.
Mm,
There really is a lot to learn, and so little time to learn it in. But I try to take advice, and I've made contact with local bookshops and
yeah.
made appointments to go and visit them. So hopefully, I'll be doing that soon.
Okay. And are you on Amazon already? Are your books on Amazon so people can buy them from
My
Amazon?
books are on Amazon, yes.
Okay,
My
good.
books are on Amazon. I do have a website, um, which is www.kayepatten.com.
Okay.
And there's an interesting story and a very silly picture of me in a hat on there.
I've seen
So
that on
that's it's
Facebook.
worth going just for that.
Okay. So you've given us some really, really good tips for the listeners to listen about marketing, listening about when you write for children, the way that you've got to write for different age groups of children. So I think that's a really great takeaway for our listeners because there must be lots of people out there who want to write children's stories. How do you begin? Just if you would touch on how do you begin to write the children's story? You particularly, how did you start?
Um, I feel really fortunate in the fact that I was an early years specialist when I was a teacher. So I've read a huge amount of children's stories. And
Mm,
I think that's the way is to read a lot of the stories that are out there. Even if you go to the library and have a look, look how they're presented, look at the storyline. Not all of them are there to teach you a lesson. Some are
Mm,
just for fun, and that's okay. I love an element of fun in a story,
mm,
and I like to think that my silly sense of humor comes through in all my stories. Um, I think the thing is you've got to read and go and see what children are enjoying at the moment, and read the stories. And other than that, just do it, do it, do it, do it. As Michael Heppel would say, you cannot edit a blank page. And if I can quote another famous writer,
sure.
Margaret Atwood would say, Margaret Atwood would say, the waste paper basket is your friend. So if it's not right, chuck it and start again.
I
But
love
do
that.
it, get it down on paper, and then see where it leads you.
That is fantastic advice. Yes, because I think sometimes when we're starting, we don't really know if what we've written has any says anything at all. So we just chuck it away and we chuck it away and we chuck it away. And we could be chucking away little gems. So whatever we've written,
Yes.
let's I think somebody told me
If,
that you just write
do you know,
any
sorry,
way.
Beth, do you know what? Do you know what I was going to say is
Yes.
that it reminds me of being at university
Hmm.
and your dissertation is due and you don't start it because it will never live up to the expectation of what it is in your head. So I would always put off writing it, because it would never be as good as I was thinking it was going to be. Um, but I hate to keep quoting Michael Heppel, but one thing I learned was, um, perfect is better than done is better than perfect, because perfect doesn't exist. And I've only just realized that concept of it's never going to be perfect. I look at, my first book that I wrote, as in, Princess Nanny, and if I was writing it now, I would do it differently.
Hmm.
But that's the process. That's the process we go through as learning to be a writer. So that's what it reminds me of, putting off my dissertation because it's never going to be that good. And then I'm like, oh, I need to get it done. So
And the other thing is that once we've written our book, even if we don't feel as though it's the best we could have done, others will think differently because when they read it, they read it from a different perspective. So we can't always judge ourselves,
mm,
can we?
we are our own harshest critics, because I know when I've discussed illustrations that I've been disappointed with, that other people have loved. So yeah, it
Yeah,
is about perception too.
yeah. And one last question I'd like to ask you. What's next in your children's storytelling? Do you have a whole series lined up, or are you going to write separate stories, or what is your next adventure in storytelling going to be?
Well, when I was writing A Donkey Named Dave, I had another huge learning experience, and that was once Dave had been rescued, and it's important to know that he was rescued and he wasn't stolen,
Mhm.
is that, um,
I
I
wonder about
started,
that.
I started, I started to look up what donkeys eat,
Yes,
and I was getting carried away in thinking about what do they eat, and then I realized that it's my story. He can eat pizza if he wants to.
yes, yes,
And that's how we ended up in the bunk bed in Madeline's room. And she says, "Don't worry, Dave, I'll sleep at the top," because I wasn't fully invested in my own imagination.
yes,
And then I realized that he could eat pizza if I wanted to. He doesn't have to have, what the donkey sanctuary says he should have.
yeah.
Um, and they could have whatever I decided,
Mm,
which is why he ended up on a roller coaster as well. So, um, but that was another thing, is really letting your imagination fully go. You think you've let it go,
yeah.
but until you've put a donkey in a bunk bed and a roller coaster, then no, you haven't let it go.
I have to say that when I read that book and I saw the illustration, I kind of took a step backwards, thinking, "Oh, hang on, he's in a bed. Now, how did you get him into the bed, lying on his back, legs up in the air?" And it was really funny. And then when the dad walks in, and he doesn't make any real mention or surprise at Davis in the bed, and she's up at the top. It was the most normal thing to do in your story.
It really was. And another thing, Beth, about in my stories, I really, really like to project the humor. I like to project that not everyone has got a conventional family life, but just because it's unconventional doesn't mean it's dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And that's really important to me. And in one of my books, one of the children is deaf and wears a hearing aid. And like Dave in the bunk bed, there's no mention of it. There's no need to mention it because if we're going to be really inclusive, we don't need to be mentioning it all the time. But if someone is reading a book who does use hearing aids
Mm.
and they see the red or the blue hearing aid, they'll know exactly what that is, and that it's that's inclusion. That's how it should be.
Yeah. And in fact, what I think, what you seem to have really got, that's quite a bit of quite magical, is in Marcus and the Milk Snatcher, the very last page, there are no words. You say nothing. It's obvious. And I think that's what children, they don't pick up on things that we as adults pick up. If a child is deaf, they don't actually say anything, do they? They just keep talking. And that's what's wonderful about children's stories, the way I love children's stories and to read children's stories and not feel any bias or prejudice. It's just how it is. They see it as it is. And that's wonderful. Okay,
Well,
thank you. No, please carry on. Please carry on.
I'm sorry, you asked me. I think you asked me about my next adventure, my
Yes.
next book that's coming. Is I've got an idea for a series of books about a little boy called Joe Bone. He's a skeleton, and they won't let him go to school because he's not a real boy.
Yeah.
And the children next door smuggle some clothes out of lost property and befriend him and get him to come to school because he's very lonely. And then during the adventures, a dog gets into the school playing ground and runs off with his leg. And then another time, the school bully comes after them and he uses his arm as a nunchucker in some kind of martial arts defense. And at the swimming pool, he jumps in and disintegrates across the water, and they have to kind of gather him up, all obviously before the teacher sees. So that's my idea. That's my next project that I've got on the go. And I really, really do like trying the stories out on my grandchildren.
Yeah.
And I'm writing a story with my granddaughter at the moment, who seems to have been unaware of how much work is involved. So I do have to keep prodding her to
Yeah.
say, look, we've got your friends are waiting for this book. We need to finish it.
Yeah.
And that's a chapter book called The Octopus King. So we're very excited about that too.
So there is so much to look forward to from Kay with her future books. And
There are. She's got to learn how to manage her time
okay,
and what to
okay.
prioritize. What should I do?
Thank you so much, Kay. First of all, for our listeners, you can get Kay's book, Kaye Patten, Kayepatten, on Amazon and through Kay's website. And when the video is actually launched on YouTube, in the description part of the video, I will put Kay's website address so that you can easily access it to get the books from Kay or through Amazon. Whichever way, I think you're all going to be in for a wonderful treat. And I particularly love actually, I particularly love all three of them. If you can particularly love all three, I do. Thank you, Kay, for a wonderful conversation, for all the wonderful tips as well that you've given to our listeners. And I hope that many of them will take them away and find them useful when they are wanting to start writing their own stories, either whether it's children or anything else. Thank you, Kay, and
Thank you. Thank
look
you for the
forward.
invite, Beth. Thank you
Oh,
very much.
it's been my pleasure. I've really so much enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much, Kate. And
You
look
too.
forward to your next books. And maybe we can have a conversation another time about where you're going with all of this.
I look forward to it.
Thank you very much, Kate. Bye for now.